All right. Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise, honor, and glory to YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM, Makakwadash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone who taught us this truth. And salutations to the hopeful elect that's around the four corners of the globe. And the elect begins with the 144,000. YAHAWAH, who the world ignorantly calls God and Jehovah. BAHASHAM is in the name. YAHAWASHI, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. The Rakakwa, Doctor Chist, the Holy Spirit. I'm the brother Iwalamia with the GMS Chicago camp out here in Chicago. Come back at you brothers and sisters of the household of faith of the Hopeful Right Select with another lesson. And Lord, I hope this lesson be edifying through the spirit and the power of YAHAWASHI. Once again, I hope this lesson is edifying. I'm gonna just simply entitle this lesson, just a chat I had with Chat GPT. I just basically asked a question. It says, how is Revelations 13 to 16 playing out today as a digital system looms? And we know that Esau Edom is trying to push this RFID C-hip, which is the mark of the beast, according to Revelations 13 to 16. You read down on down to verse 18. That Esau Edom is ultimately trying to force this RFID chip upon the masses of the people for ultimate control, man. Because this is what it's all about at the end of the day. It's about control. I was just asking ChatGPT, just playing around with it, a couple of questions. And I ultimately asked it, because you have to ask ChatGPT the right, type of question. You have to word it correctly to ultimately to get your answer, because you gotta eat the meat, spit out the bones, because that Esau Edom ultimately tries to place, with certain things like this to still try to hide his agenda. But I just simply asked the question. It says, how is Revelations 13 and 16 playing out today as a digital system looms? And right, with this RFID chip, it's going to be the new form of payment, But this is what ChatGPT was ultimately saying. It says Revelations 13 and 16, it says, describes a future system in which people are required to receive a mark. And if you go into that mark in Revelations 13, 16, it goes into charagma, which means incision. And it says connected to an economic activity, buying and selling. It says many people today wonder whether emerging digital technologies, especially digital ID system, biometrics, and cashless payment platforms relate to this prophecy. And as I'm doing this lesson, not too long ago, they just got rid of making pennies, because little bit by bit, they're gonna get rid of the whole money system, man. Paper money, that's gonna be a thing of the past, man. And Esau Edom is gonna require you to ultimately to get that grain of rice under your hand, in your hand on your forehead, that RFID chip, man. And it's gonna be used for the ultimate form of control, because we know that Esau Edom is trying to play God here on the planet Earth. It says the text describes coercive economic control. It says the prophecy emphasizes, it says universal requirement, all small and great, rich and poor. It says economic dependence, because ultimately what Esau Edom wants from the people is ultimately what? You to bow down before their system, man. To ultimately you to come to them for the one of all things, man. For you to ultimately to be their servants, and ultimately for you to be their to ultimately to come to them and ultimately look at them as a god. It says a form of allegiance or compliance. It says many Christians interpret this as a warning about systems that could centralize economic authority, because who ultimately been pushing this, that it's been the mark of the beast is the RFID chips, talking really starting with our elders and apostles, man, because nobody really pushes this prophecy more than Great Millstone, man. Starting with our elders and apostles, man. We push this prophecy ad nauseum, man, because this is the most important prophecy before what? Before the coming of the kingdom of heaven, man. Before the return of Yahawashi, It says digital IDs. It says used for healthcare, banking, access, travel, and government services. And that's what we're seeing right now, man. Because with this whole digital ID is ultimately another step forward till we get to the RFID chip, man. Hey, this is another step forward. What's that? England ultimately say you have to have a digital ID to go grocery shopping and things of that nature, right? It says increasingly integrated with biometric data. It says some countries are pushing for a single centralized identity systems, and right, Esau Edom is using that gradualism. He is giving the people ultimately what subtly moved into this new system. It says central bank digital currency, CBDCs. It says programmable money controlled by central banks could theoretically track, limit, or approve transactions. will eliminate anonymous cash transactions, because we know that they're trying to get rid of paper money right now as we speak, man. You know, and everything what we're seeing with the CBDCs, the digital IDs, it's just a subtle step until we get to that RFID chip, which is the mark of the beast, man. You know, it says biometric payment systems. It says palm scanning, facial recognition. It says fingerprint pay, already used by companies like Amazon, Apple, and some banks. And exactly right, man. You know, moving, from away from the, the money system and moving to something digital, a digital format. And everything is going to be, worked off the RFID chip, man. Everything that we're currently seeing right now, because, they're purposely trying to crash the system, man. Trying to crash the dollar so they can ultimately introduce this new system, which is already in place, man. Esau Edom is just trying to use the right, event to ultimately to bring this system on a worldwide scale, man. But, just asking, ChatGPT a few things, regarding Revelations 13 and 16, the RFID chip, which is going to be a worldwide event. This thing is going to be pushed worldwide, for you to ultimately to take, if you want to have some type of life in this society, man. You're going to have to take that chip. But I'm going to start out right here. This is the book of Habakkuk 2 and 1. All this is about control at the end of the day, man. Esau Edom, trying to become like the Most High. Habakkuk 2 and 1, it says, I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower, and I will watch to see what he will say unto me, and what I will answer when I am reproved. And YAHAWAH answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. Right, make it plain upon tables, because we ultimately break these prophecies down in a way that you can understand it, man. And ultimately John the Revelator had this vision. What was that, 2,000 years ago on the island of Patmos? John the Revelator, when he got the vision of the RFID chip, which is the mark of the beast, is being is being made known in our time. It says, verse 3, it says, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. Meaning what? That these prophecies are no longer going to be prolonged. These things will come to pass, man. And the RFID chip being the biggest prophecy that we're waiting on, man. And it's here. But we're just waiting on that major event to happen for this society to crash. And Esau Edom had pushes it upon a worldwide scale, man. Verse 4 says, behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. Right, but behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him. Talking about Esau Edom, man, because everything he does is contrary to the ways of Yahawah, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, man. He doesn't follow the ways of the Bible. He follow what? His own wicked agenda, man. It says, verse 5, it says, yea, also because he transgresses by wine, write those philosophies. He is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied. Because ultimately what Esau Edom does was that Micah 2 and 2, he covered fields and take them by violence. Ultimately, when he ultimately steals, things, and he ultimately takes things and he things to himself, he's never satisfied. He always wants more. And and is as death, and it cannot be satisfied, but gathereth up. Salaki, it says, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. And that's what he wants to do on a worldwide scale by his RFID chip technology, man. Esau Edom, even going back to ancient Rome, man. He had vassal states. He had, tributaries, different, tributes that ultimately, gave tribute to Rome, man. But ultimately what, in this time today, by his technology, he's ultimately, wants everybody to bow down to his system, by ultimately everybody taking the RFID chip, and ultimately what, everybody cleaving onto him, man, as his servants. And what, he's being being like the Most High here on the planet Earth, man. And that's what this devil wants to do, man. Makes me think of a scripture. Let me grab this real quick. This is the book of 2 Thessalonians 2 and 3. It says, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first. And that's what happened when we ultimately lost our heritage. Was that Jeremiah 17? You know, we lost our heritage, man. You know, 70 AD, we was pushed out of our homeland. We was pushed into the interiors of Africa, you know, come over here in the transatlantic slave trade, man. You know, so ultimately what, that falling away already happened. But in this time right now, this current age we're currently in, the Lord is waking up his people, man, beginning with the elect. And it says, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, right? And Esau Edom is being revealed who the devil that he is, man. You know, starting with the small, the tiny tops. You know, those those ish people over there in the land of Israel proclaiming to be us. You know, ultimately what, they're being exposed as the devils as they are, man. You know, they're being exposed that they're not the people, man. It says, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called YAHAWAH, or what, and that is worship, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And that's what this devil wants to do. He wants to proclaim himself as the Most High, man. And he ultimately wants to do that by having everybody, you know, electronically tagged, man. The Rfid chip, you know, so you can what? To be his servant forever, man. You know, that's what this devil wants, man. He wants to be claimed as the Most High here on planet Earth, man, by having ultimately everybody chipped and ultimately what? Everybody monitored at all times, man. You know, he wants everything, everything, you know, the power that the Most High has. This is what this devil wants, man. You know, and he's trying to fulfill that on the left-hand side. You know, by ultimately having everybody chipped, everybody, you know, he points to him. You know, everybody look up to him as a God, man. You know, but let's get this let's get the prophecy in Revelation 13. This is the book of Revelation 13 and verse 14. It says, he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, right? His technology, you know, his AI, you know, his RFID chip, man. You know, because with this RFID chip, you know, hey, what's that? Those left-handed miracles, man. You know, hey, ultimately what? You know, with this chip, you know, suddenly a person that was disabled can suddenly walk again, man, can talk again. You know, that left-handed, you know, that left-hand energy, man. You know, those left-handed miracles, man. And it says, which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they shall make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live, right? Because we know that this is the second leg of the Roman Empire, man. You know, ultimately what? Esau Edom coming back into power, you know, establishing America, which is the second leg of the Roman Empire, man. It says, verse 15, it says, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast shall both speak, and cause that as many as will not worship the image of the beast shall be killed. Right? Ultimately what? His new world order, man. You know, ultimately what? You know, bowing down to his system, man, his new world order. That's what this devil wants the people to do, man. And ultimately what? The ultimate form of servitude is you what? Getting chipped, man. You know, that's what this devil ultimately wants, you know, is going to push on a worldwide scale amongst on the masses of the people, man. You know, and ultimately in this stage in the game, if you're not teaching that what the RFID chip is the mark of the beast, hey, you either took the bag, you're a false prophet, or the Lord ultimately blinded you, man. You know, and ultimately what? If you're not teaching that what the RFID chip is the mark of the beast, you're ultimately a false prophet, man. And it says, verse 16, it says, and he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. Right. And exactly right, man. You know, the elite banking families is going to cause all to receive this mark, man. You know, to be all, it's going to be, you know, what it's going to be the form of what buying and selling. You know, if you want to participate in this society, you're going to have this chip, man, which is going to be the new form of payment. It says, verse 17 says, that no man might buy or sell save he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Right. You're not going to be able to buy and sell what if you don't have this mark. So you're going to be X'd out of society, man. You know, you're not going to be able to participate in this society. But the Lord's hopeful right select, what? They're going to lean upon YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI for the one of all things, man. Unlike 2/3 of our people that's going to bow down before the system, man. Hey, the Lord is going to keep his elect intact, man. You know, the elect is going to come to YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI for the one of all things, man. Not lean upon this system, man. You know, in Isaiah 10, it talks about that. Even the remnant of Israel shall return, man. You know, they're not going to lean on them that smote them, but lean on YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI in truth, man. You know, loosely paraphrasing. It says, here is wisdom. Let him that have understanding count the number of the beast, For it's the number of a man, and his number is 636. And right, you know how these devils play with numbers and things like that. 666. But ultimately, this is what this devil is trying to do. He's trying to proclaim himself to be the Most High, man. This ultimately, this RFID chip, which is the mark of the beast, it's a big part of his new world order, man. Having everybody electronically tagged, man. Having everybody under his foot, having everybody tracked and monitored at all times, man. That's him trying to play God on the planet Earth, man. But let's continue. This is the book of Deuteronomy 15 and 17. It says, then thou shalt take an all. Let me see real quick. Let me actually start up. This is the Deuteronomy, the book of Deuteronomy 15 and 16, because if you ultimately take this chip, it lets you know what? You basically telling the Most High you would rather have Esau Edom as your God, because this is what this all is about, man. This is the book of Deuteronomy 15 and 16. It says, and it shall be, if he say unto thee, I will not go away from thee, because he loveth thee, and thine house, because he is well with thee. Verse 17 says, then thou shalt take an awl and thrust it through his ear and unto the door, and he shall be thy servant forever, and also unto thy maid servant thou shalt do likewise. You're right. So ultimately, this is what this is technically is. You're basically telling the Lord that you love Esau Edom as your God, man. That's why in Revelations 14, it's a judgment for taking this chip, man. You're ultimately going to melt, man. You're going to be destroyed if you take this chip, man. The Lord is going to keep his elect away from this, but ultimately everybody else is going to bow down to the image of the beast, man. This new world order, this man's system, man. Everybody is going to bow down to it, man. Because a lot of these people can't live without ultimately participating in this society. The club life, the nightlife, being able to eat. A lot of people is going to give in. A lot of people is going to give up and submit, to Esau Edom and his RFID chip, man. And this is what this is the time that we're living in right now, man. This man is about to push this RFID chip on a worldwide scale, man. Revelations 3 talks about that. Revelations 3 and verse 10, it says, because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. Right, because ultimately us, that's in this knowledge, wisdom, understanding, we stand at 10 toes down, continue to do this work, continue to ultimately to have faith in YAHAWASHI, to do what, to do what he required of us. The Lord is going to keep us, from the hour of temptation, which is when this RFID chip gets mandated across the four corners of the world, man. This is going to be that new system, man, that new digital system. But the Lord is going to keep his elect away from it, man. Lord will be a part of that number. It says, because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. And right, this is the ultimate test, man. Would you ultimately choose this world, or would you choose YAHAWASHI, man? That's why the scripture says, those that love their life shall lose it, but those that lose their life for my sake shall find it. Because if you ultimately love your life and being in this society, you're ultimately going to bow down, to this system when this RFID chip gets mandated worldwide, man. So that's why it's evident that we cast off the ways of this world and we have no dealings with this world, man. We basically we cut off this world, man. And ultimately cleave unto YAHAWASHI, so he may in that time deliver us. Give us the necessary faith to ultimately to overcome, But ultimately, this is a means of control, and for the so-called white man, these elite banking families to become God on the planet Earth, man. They want to be like Yahweh, having control over everything, having control over your life, everything, man. Monitor where you're at all times. But ultimately, this is where we're at right now with it, man. Esau Edom is trying to create a digital, Tower of Babel. Having everybody, become one. Actually, let's grab that, because it talks about it in the Maccabees also, Antiochus Epiphanes. How he ultimately wanted to become, all become Greek. Let me see. This is the book of 1 Maccabees 1, In verse 41, it says, Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all shall be one people, and everyone shall leave his laws, so all the heathen agree according to the commandment of the king. And right, Esau Edom, has right now, Esau Edom has the technology to back it in this day and age, man. But ultimately, everybody becoming one by the form of this Rfid chip, which is the new world order, man. And ultimately it was a thing back then. Hey, going back to what? Genesis, the Tower of Babel, man. How, what was that? Nimrod wanting everybody to become one. It says, verse 43, it says, Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath. Right, now people was going to do it again this time around, man. How our people back then, ultimately what? Casted off the ways of the Lord, YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, and ultimately what? Cleaved unto what? Antiochus Epiphanes and became Greek. Our people was going to do it. 2/3 of our people was going to do it again, man. But ultimately what? Taking that chip. And it says, verse 44 says, For the king has sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, that they shall follow the strange laws of the land. It says, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings and in the temple, and that they shall profane the Sabbath and festival days, and pollute the sanctuary and the holy people. Right, ultimately what? Our people is going to do the same thing this time around, man. They're going to trust in the shadow of Egypt, which is what? America, Isaiah 30, about ultimately what? Bowing down into this man's system, his new world order, and ultimately taking that chip, man. About ultimately what? Casting out the ways of YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, disregarding YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, because ultimately, as I read in that Deuteronomy 15, ultimately talking about, the all, it just shows that what? That you will have, rather prefer Esau Edom be your God than YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI. And it's a judgment for that, man. Let's actually grab that. I'm going to close out with that one. Revelations 14, Salakia. Revelations 14 and verse 9. It says, And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast in his image and receiveth his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of YAHAWAH, which is poured out without mixture, and the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Right, so you're ultimately going to melt on the soils of America, man. If you ultimately what? You bow down to this man's system, you take that RFID chip, you're going to be destroyed on the soils of America, man. You're going to catch that nuclear fire, man. You're going to burn. And it says what? In the presence of the Lamb. The Lamb is YAHAWASHI. You can read about that in John the 1st chapter. And it says, And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever, and they had no rest day nor night, who worship the beast in his image, and who receiveth and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. And exactly right, man. If you bow down to this system, you take this man's RFID chip, which is the mark of the beast, you're ultimately going to be tormented with fire and brimstone, which is those nuclear missiles, man. The Lord is going to keep you down here and melt you. Zechariah, what's that? Zechariah, I believe it's either Zephaniah or Zechariah talks about, the eye shall consume away in their holes, tongue shall consume away in their mouth. So you're ultimately going to taste the judgment of YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, man. But ultimately what? You bound down to this man's system, you're taking his RFID chip, and you ultimately looking at this man as a God. The Lord is going to destroy you, man. But at the end of the day, man, this is all about control that Esau Edom ultimately yearns for, man. And he's going to do that, ultimately what? Push that chip upon the masses to ultimately try to achieve it. But one more scripture. Salakia, I got to get this. Job 5 and 12, it says, He disappointed the devices of the crafty, so that their hands cannot perform their enterprise. Or that enterprise is talking about the new world order, man. So Esau, Salakia, YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI is going to disappoint Esau Edom, because he's going to come, close and you're trying to fulfill his new world order, but the Lord is going to yank it away from him, man. So it's ultimately going to be to what? His disappointment, man. YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI is going to disappoint him. Let's actually grab one more, Salakia. Spirit flowing. Let's see. Job 20 and 22. It says, In the fullness of his sufficiency, he shall be in straits. Every hand of the wicked shall come upon him. And right, you're going into that word wicked goes into the word imal, which goes into the laborer. So ultimately, what? Talking about what? The working class. Because everybody is against this devil right now, man. So we know that what? That this devil is scrambling, you know, and ultimately what? To try to what? To get his plans into fruition. Let's continue. Verse 23, it says, when he is about to fill his belly, Yahweh shall cast the fury of his wrath upon him, and shall rain upon him while he is eating. So when he is getting ready to enjoy his new world order, the Lord is going to what? Yank it away from him, man. You know, when he is getting comfortable, he sees everything is going according to plan. That's when the Lord is going to strike him, man. It says, verse 24, it says, he shall flee from the iron weapon, and the bull of steel shall strike him through. Right, that bull of steel, talking about those nuclear missiles, man. You know, what's that in 2nd Ezra 16? It says, it talks about, you know, the arrow. Let's actually grab that real quick. I don't want to butcher it. Second Ezra 16 and verse 13, it says, for strong is his right hand that bendeth the bow. His arrows that he shooteth are sharp and shall not miss when they begin to be shot into the ends of the world. And exactly right, man. Hey, that bow talking about those nuclear missiles, man, because that's what the Lord is going to use to bring, you know, the downfall and destruction of America, man. Because in Revelation 18, it talks about it's going to take the Lord 1 hour to destroy this place, man. You know? And that's how the Lord is ultimately going to disappoint this man's new world order. But let's go back to that Job 20. We're going to finish it out. And it says, verse 24, it says, he shall flee from the iron weapon, and the bow of steel shall strike him through. It is drawn and cometh out of the body. Yea, the glittering sword cometh out of his gall. Terrors are upon him. Right, exactly right, man. That's going to be the end of Esau's kingdom, man. You know, those nuclear missiles. Because it talks about in, what's that, 2nd Ezra 6? It says, for Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth, man. You know? And this is the stage that we're at right now, man. This is the Esau Edom's last hoorah, man. You know, he's going to try to push this Rfid chip among the masses, man, that mark of the beast, which is the Rfid chip. He's going to, what, to push it upon the masses, to ultimately, what, to fulfill his NWO agenda, but it's going to come to naught, man. And like I said, this is all about control at the end of the day. Him, you know, these elite Bacon families, you know, Esau Edom trying to become like the Most High, man. But just something I want to bring out through the spirit, you know, Lord, I hope this lesson was edifying. I want to end up by giving all praise, honor, and glory to YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of great millstone that taught us the truth, and salutations to the hopeful elect that's around the four corners of the globe. Lord willing, I hope this lesson was edifying. Until next time, Kwam Yasharallah, Shalom, and Abba Ball. Until next time, Lord willing.